Welcome back, travelers to Legendary Lore. So, basically in this episode, we're taking a little break from the main storyline to focus on the Weatherlight.
Weatherlight.
And obviously, as you can see from the thumbnail, Braids! Braids is in this story, and it's super duper kill. But essentially what happens is that you have our Weatherlight crew, and they're flying over Otaria. Which is where, of course, we had the whole entire story of the Odyssey show up, Torment, Scourge, Trainers, all that stuff happened there. The Cabal, Achroma, Phage, Corona, the first time around. All that sort of thing happened there. And last we knew, there was this whole deal where Braids, she had been supposedly killed because she was consumed by the Nightmare Realm, essentially. She was just kind of like completely absorbed into the Nightmare space. So, essentially, while this is happening, you have the Weatherlight crew overhead, and Shauna's there, and she's thinking about her ancestor. The Sisay, the original Captain Sisay, and how epic she was and absolutely legendary.
We loved her.
It's true. But the thing is that this Sisay, Shauna, she doesn't feel like she lives up to that legacy. As the captain of the current Weatherlight crew, she knows that she has a gigantic shadow cast over her, essentially, by her predecessor.
So Jorah's not the captain anymore?
No, Jorah was only the captain at the very, very beginning.
Okay, she's the captain now.
I was going to say Andus for a little bit of time during the Dominaria set.
Yeah.
Before Shauna got added back on.
Okay.
Yeah. So, essentially, and I guess the interim up until that point. But as far as storylines go, that's how it went. So, essentially what happens is that they're flying overhead, and Tiana is the angel that is the guardian angel for the Weatherlight. Her entire purpose is to guard the Weatherlight. We talked about this before.
Very cute characterization.
We did the original Dominaria for Legendary Lore, right?
Nope.
We didn't?
We did not.
We never did that. Oh my gosh.
Don't click the link in the description.
There isn't a link in the description to that.
There was one to the story to read this, so check that out. But
that's fair. So, yeah, essentially what happens is that Tiana is there, and she's dealing with the Weatherlight basically buckling under the pressure. All this Phyrexian gunk they've had on it has basically made the Weatherlight very upset because it doesn't like having all this just disgustingness all over it and the ooze and everything. And so Shauna is there, Raph is there, and they're essentially all talking and trying to figure out what's going on. And this giant bone dragon appears out of nowhere, which I want to imagine is Bladewing, the Arisen. I want to say that's what it is. It doesn't say that, but considering the possibilities of a giant bone dragon that's kind of super epic and also destroying everything on Dominaria, I'd say it's gotta be Bladewing. I'm choosing to say that it's Bladewing. I'm taking that particular bit. So essentially what winds up happening is that they fight this thing and they defeat it, sort of. They basically just get it away, they knock it away, and there's this essentially this disturbance that they feel, and they have to land. Their ship is not dying, but it's damaged. They can't keep flying as it is. If they try that, they're definitely not going to make it. And so they had to land in Otaria and go from there. The problem with that is essentially that there's nothing there. Most of these places have been destroyed. Everything's kind of just on its own. And they did go through Phyrexian territory. Raph, Shauna, and Tiana, the three of them, they're the ones that go off to try and find the parts. Tiana can like feel them calling to her, kind of thing. Like she knows, because of the fact that she's trying to protect the ship, she's there for the ship to defend it.
Yeah.
She knows where it is exactly. The problem is that she doesn't want to leave the Weatherlight because of the fact that it's her ward, essentially. She needs to protect it, right? So Tiana's been like really tense because of the fact that everything is terrible. And her ship is damaged, the ship is dying, and that, like, she just feels really bad about leaving it. She doesn't want to.
It's like I'm messed up.
But she does. And they go, and the three of them, they journey off into the wilderness, and they basically find this shadowy wall, the shadowy bubble. And basically they meet Braids. And she's...
so she just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it, like, she's just absolutely bonkers. I mean, I can actually just... I'll tell you what she says. This so there's like an actual like wall of shadows that shows up, and Raph doesn't know what it is. She's kind of freaked out by it. Tiana's like, okay, well, if we touch that, we're probably going to die. And if Raph's like, well, what if we send Shanna in there? Because Shanna's got that whole like spell immunity, and she's like, if she goes in there and she gets eradicated, it's not going to help anybody. And that's when
It's like then my ship would be in trouble.
yeah, exactly. And so this is where we have the braided stranger appear, and it's someone. She basically comes out of the shadows, and she's got like obviously she looks like she's made of braids. And all these braids have like little mouths at the ends of them. And like they're snapping. And she goes, well, it's you and you and you and you already.
She's such a cool design.
You're lucky you didn't listen to him and, it would have vaporized you. And you'd have deserved it. Didn't your parents tell you not to play with deadly magic? And they're like,
No?
who are you? And they basically, they ask Raph, they go, is she Phyrexian? And it's like, no, that's not a Phyrexian. It doesn't look safe, but it's not a Phyrexian. And they're like, well, who are you? She goes, my name. That'd be telling. You can call me Braids. You don't need to impress me. You three, you didn't get yourselves killed up there. That's good enough. And so basically, they come to the conclusion that if they help her, she'll help them. She'll get them the parts that they need. But they need to help her. And they're like, okay, well, what do you want us to do? I need you to kill me. And they're like, excuse you? Basically, because of the fact that she's a bunch of nightmares and insane, she literally had a split personality, which resulted in a shard version of Braids branching off from her and becoming its own distinct entity that she needs to now reabsorb. The problem is that it's got a whole bunch of defenses and Braids can't go into them, otherwise she might get absorbed instead.
Interesting.
It's weird.
Sounds
But
like it. It explains her card if you can understand it, so no, it doesn't.
so essentially what happens is that she says, okay, you three, you go into that nightmare zone. You go ahead and you'll be fine and everything. You won't be fine. You're going to go in completely insane because it's all of your strongest nightmares ever and they're going to absolutely wreck you.
Yeah.
So once you go through there, you're going to see me. It's not actually me though. It's the other me. And if you defeat the other me, then I'll get you your parts. That's it. Super easy. And so essentially what happens is these three holes open up for Shanna, Raph, and Tiana. And what I thought was really cool while reading this, because I believe I was reading this before I saw the Shanna card, the one that's band colors.
Yes.
This was a cool representation of a white-red, white-blue, and white-green legendary creature helping a mono-black character get through this whole deal.
It's a coalition.
And essentially, what's important is that they were the ones best equipped to deal with those nightmares. If they had sent Arvad, the vampire, that would not have gone nearly as well.
Is he still around?
He is. He's just kind of there.
Is he just on the Weatherlight?
Yes, he just gives other legendaries +2/+2.
Like, are we doing anything?
Yeah.
We are.
They're like, okay, knock off Krovax. We don't need you right now. You can hold off on that. Thanks. So essentially what happens is the three of them go in there. We don't see Tiana or Raph's perspectives. It's all Shanna. And essentially what she experiences are all these nightmares start showing up and she's like, yeah, well, whatever. Until she sees Sisay, her ancestor. And Sisay's like, you're a failure. You're worthless. You're gonna get your crew killed. You need to calm down. But essentially, she's facing her deepest fears. The nightmare of she has actually failed her ancestors. And she's like seeing like people dead and people that her entire crew, she's going through the Weatherlight itself. And it's like been turned into like a Phyrexian monstrosity. And all the people that she knows and loves are dead and everything's terrible. And eventually she gets out of it and she gets into the other side. Tiana comes out like nothing happened. Because obviously angels don't really have nightmares because they have such a very strong, resolute pureness to them. Uh-huh. So she had no fears that were like strong enough for her to overcome her. So she kind of just like, so what? And then of course we have Raph who comes out sick. He's like, and what basically transpires after that is that there's the shard braids. She's just as insane. She tries to kill them. They manage to defeat her using their variety of spells. Raph uses a counter spell. Shanna uses the fact that she's immune to direct spells. Tiana uses her epic angelness. And then while that shard Braids is weakened, the actual Braids shows up and essentially it just absorbs her back into it. It's like, thank you! And then takes them, gives them the parts and sends them on their way. Braids just kind of stays there to rule Otaria. Fun side note, it turns out that after she did this, we don't actually see this in the storyline, but we know from the cards that she becomes the new leader of the Cabal.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
That's so cool.
We had Lagomos, the red-black legendary creature. He was the current leader of the Cabal. Then Braid showed up and it was like, hey, I'm a Dimension Summoner from like hundreds of years ago. And I actually am a part of the Cabal. Like the original Cabal. I knew the Patriarch. We were buddies. We'd go torture people, then have coffee. So like...
He dug me up when I got buried alive.
Yeah, like... yeah, pretty much. So essentially...
You got what?
What?
I was too insane to die, I can tell. No, that was that time. This time, I was just too angry to die.
Yeah, so...
No, I don't feel angry. I was just crazy again.
It's a whole other story.
Braids has layers. Braids has braids.
Braids is made of braids. So essentially, she does that and she gets complete control of the Cabal almost instantaneously because everybody's like super impressed with how absolutely insane she is. So I just love the idea that the Cabal could just become these essentially Rakdos cultists that aren't necessarily evil, just chaotic. And so we have that whole deal. And then we have our 3 members of the Weatherlight crew.
I could imagine a Braid side quest in a Magic Legends. It's like, okay, we're going to sacrifice your friend. Why? We're a cult. That's what we do. But we need our friend. Okay, can you give me someone else to sacrifice? Would it be okay if it was a bad guy? We just need somebody to sacrifice.
It literally doesn't matter. Virgin or not, we don't care. We just need them to die.
This is the main villain of the story.
Great!
You saved the world. They're just over partying. It's like, bye.
So essentially what happens is that you have the Weatherlight crew, they get back to the Weatherlight. And Arva's there like, it's all terrible! Everything is terrible! And the Weatherlight is in the sky blasting green lasers at all the crew that remains. Lasers at all the crew that's left over because it's been completely Phyrexianized.
Did they have measures to prevent that?
Sort of. They just had what they thought was rotted gunk.
They put a fake mustache on it.
And the mustache essentially was absorbed into the actual machine itself.
The machine has become the mustache.
Now, the problem with this is that it doesn't have like complete control yet. Like it's just gaining sentience. Because it's no one actually piloting it. It's actually like a completed entity, creature. The organics have started to meld with it. This is the card that we actually have, the Weatherlight completed. It is actually an actual thing. That's why the first part of it is that it gets the counters that let you like start it off.
So while they had the disguise on it, it was slowly
gaining that.
Okay.
And slowly becoming that. And they do eventually get onto the ship. And to try and stop it.
And it eats them.
Well, you have them essentially going through this Phyrexianized...
It wasn't as funny as mine, you don't need to say it.
They're going through this Phyrexianized Weatherlight, and they're fighting all the crew members they used to have. Because they've all been completed as well. In the time they were missing. And so, essentially, they're going through and they're trying to fight everybody. Essentially, all the non-named characters. All of them, they're the ones that got Phyrexianized. And so, they're going through all of this stuff. And they get to in the main engine room, which is this power stone, and they need to get the power stone out of the ship to try and stop it, right?
Is this still the Braid story?
Yes. Braids is done. I know.
Why am I still here?
Yeah, pretty much. But essentially what happens is that they're there trying to undo it, and there's all these Phyrexians, and then they see Slimefoot. And Slimefoot's like... And so Shauna, she saves Slimefoot, and Tiana rips out the power stone, and they get off the ship before it flies away from them. And so they're stranded on Otaria, in the middle of this huge fight, and they just lost the Weatherlight to the Phyrexians. It's a huge loss, and nobody knows what's coming. Nobody knows what's happening. And that's essentially how this story ends. There's no resolution to what happens to them. They're just stuck there.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with some more legendary lore. Leave a like if you like the video and subscribe. That way you don't miss the end of this amazing story.